Pac-Man is a name synonymous with Arcade1Up as they've released so many different versions of the King of the Arcades in their 5-year history. But is this truly the must-have Pac-Man? Hello retro gaming and home arcade fans, it's me, it's Michael B. Thank you so very much for watching. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Arcade1Up Pac-Man XL cabinet, and it's pretty awesome. So that's right everybody, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Pac-Man XL from Arcade1Up. The king of the arcades has finally came to the larger form factor. I want to say a huge thank you to Arcade1Up for sending me out this cabinet for the purpose of this review. It's actually a US Costco only exclusive right now, so I wouldn't have been able to get my hands on it otherwise. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you very much everybody for checking out the video. Guys, I always appreciate the support. If this is your first time here, you like what you see, go ahead, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, all that YouTube stuff. So let's start this off by taking a look at the cabinet itself, and as you can see, this is a replication of the original Pac-Man arcade cabinet. For those of you who have the deluxe model, this is going to look very similar, as essentially the XL is the deluxe model on steroids. You can take a look at it in comparison to the other XL cabinets that I have here in my office arcade. That's right, this is my row of big boys. Take a look at the art on the side of the cab and you will notice that it's closer to the top. If you take a look at the original arcade, the art is actually more so covering the entire side of the cabinet almost, but here it's up towards the top. The reason for that being is Arcade1Up actually cannot stretch or distort the image for the art they are given for their cabinets. And while this cabinet is taller, it's much more narrow than the original cabinet, so they have to keep the art image in a correct aspect ratio, and in order to do that, they squat it and put it up closer to the top. One other aspect that is different from the original cabinet that I really like is the red trim that's included, or T-molding, that's not on the original arcade cabinet. I think it gives it a pop and a contrast that just sets it aside and is very nice looking. Let's move on to the marquee, and this is easily one of the best looking marquees from Arcade1Up to date. It has even light distribution and no visible hot spots. The art on the marquee looks fantastic. That's because it's the correct size, so we don't see any pixelization as it's put on the marquee itself. You will notice that the marquee has a really great image, and that's because it is actually reverse printed on the inside. I'm sure some of you have seen pictures from Costco and other locations where people have actually put the marquee on backwards, and that is because of the reverse printing. So then we get to the screen, which has been a big issue with other XL releases from Arcade1Up. I don't think this one's going to be much of a problem. The first thing I want to discuss is the angle of the screen matches the angle from the original arcade. This is something we wanted to see from Arcade1Up ever since the Pac-Man 40th was teased in that trailer all the way back in 2021. However, they never went with this specific angle, had it more upright, but now we finally have the angle that matches the original angle from the arcade. I understand why they were hesitant to do it, as when you have small kids in front of this arcade, it may be tough for them to see on this angle, so you are going to want to bring a stool for your little kids. But for us adults, it's absolutely perfect, and the way it probably always should have been. Speaking on the screen, and I know a lot of people were concerned going into the second wave of the XL cabs, unlike the XL Golden Tee and the XL NBA Jam Shaq Edition, this is in fact a BOE monitor 19-inch 5x4 screen, and it looks fantastic. The colors are bright and vibrant, and there's no washout from any angles. Of course, this is not Arcade1Up's first foray into making a Pac-Man cabinet, so of course, the bezel looks pretty fantastic. It's the standard bezel they've been using for years with the Pac-Man cabinet, and in the larger form factor, the larger size, it still looks fantastic. One pro tip though, If you look in the manual, originally this screen comes with a layer of plastic over it like all Arcade1Up cabinets, and if you follow the manual exactly the instructions, it will tell you not to remove the plastic till pretty much the very end. I would advise you not to do that. Take the top of the plastic off before you actually build the cabinet, because if not, when you try to tear the plastic off, you're going to get a little bit of remnants left up top. So this is the one instance where I agree with B. Kong. Avoid what the manual tells you. Well, now let's talk about the control panel, and this is where you're going to start to see some cracks in the foundation for what is almost a perfect Arcade1Up in my opinion. First off, the control panel, much like the deluxe models, is actually part of the screen component, so it comes in one piece, unlike other Arcade1Up cabinets where you actually have a separate section for the control panel. Why that's difficult is once the cabinet is built, it's impossible to remove the control panel without taking the whole cabinet apart basically. So when you are looking to do things like modify the controls or sticks, or if you have any issues, you're going to want to get that sorted out before you actually build the cabinet. Otherwise, you're going to take the whole thing apart in order to do that. So it's a little bit more difficult to modify. Once again, this is Arcade1Up's millionth Pac-Man, so the artwork on the control panel is fantastic, does a great job of recreating the original arcade, and it's modified appropriately to work with a multicade function like Arcade1Up does. As this cabinet has 14 games, the control panel has to accommodate all 14. One negative thing I can say about the control panel is that it's a little narrow. So for those of you that like to rest your hands, the palms of your hands, on the control panel when moving the sticks or pressing the buttons, you're going to have a hard time doing that, because where the control panel isn't as wide as you typically find from an Arcade1Up control panel, I found the backs of my palms resting over the edge, and that was a little bit uncomfortable. It would have been nice if the control panel was a little bit wider, and honestly it would have been nice if the entire arcade was a little bit wider on the side so the artwork would look a little bit better, which we talked about earlier. Another feature which I'm not overly in love with is in fact the light up buttons. Me personally, I think they're dumb. I don't know why people like them on arcade cabinets. If that's your jam, I apologize, but I don't like the light up buttons. But I was told early on with some of the vault cabinets that did feature them, there would be an option to turn off the lighting if you did not like it. Unfortunately, on the Pac-Man XL cab, there is no option to turn off the light up buttons. I don't know if it's possible that we will see an option somewhere later on down the line through some kind of firmware update, but hopefully they come up with it, because I'm not in love with the light up buttons. One thing I will say about the buttons though, they do feel slightly improved other previous Arcade1Up offerings. They're not as mushy as the buttons we're used to, and they're actually not concave, they're convex, or I've got that mixed up, one or the other. Anyways, there's no indent when you put your finger in there, it's kind of a solid button, so that's a different feel to an Arcade1Up cab that we're not really used to. I do say the buttons do feel a little better. They're still not there, they're still not great, but they do feel a little bit better. Another thing I do want to discuss, there was a misconception when this cabinet first came out. I remember being in the B&B with my buddy Detroit Love, who said he felt that this cabinet had an 8-way joystick. However, thanks to my buddy P-Dubs, who's already done a review on the Pac-Man XL, he did in fact confirm that it is a 4-way gate in the joystick. So for those of you that were concerned you wouldn't be able to play Pac-Man correctly because of the 8-way gate, rest assured, it is in fact a 4-way gate. I also do have to give Arcade1Up a lot of props on the front panel they put on this arcade, because they did two things here. There's art on it that matches the art of the original arcade cabinet, which you'll love to see, and it's cool Pac-Man design. But on top of that, they once again have placed a molded coin door, and it is at an appropriate height. And I absolutely love these molded coin doors, one of my favorite inclusions on all new Arcade1Up cabinets. This one does go a step above though, because it actually has light up coin slot buttons. I think these are fantastic, a very, very minor piece that Arcade1Up have added, but it adds so much value, and hopefully they continue to add these light up coin slot buttons to all future releases. Moving on to the games, and this cabinet comes with 14 included games. For those of you that had the deluxe cab already, or maybe last year's Pac-Mania cab, the games list will seem familiar to you because it's the exact same games list. This cabinet does feature a pretty interesting selection of Namco Bandai games, with 40% being Pac-Man games themselves. However, no Miss Pac-Man is included, so that dream cab with Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man in it, still out of reach. One of the issues when we do have cabs that have either a horizontal or vertical monitor is playing those games back and forth. This cabinet only features 2 horizontal games with Pac-Land and Rolling Thunder, but the good thing is, with the larger screen, the horizontal games on the vertical screen, which is an absolute curse on the smaller deluxe and 3/4 scale cabs, doesn't look as bad on the 19-inch. You're getting a much larger picture. It isn't that little 13-inch box, and the game is very playable in this format. Another big plus with this cabinet, although it's not the first time we've seen this on a Pac-Man cabinet from Arcade1Up, is all games do in fact have an options menu where you could do things like turn off smoothing. Thank God there's no locked smoothing like back on the Pac-Man 40th cab. And you can also change the difficulty, add extra lives, different options for each game. So when this cab originally came out, there was no option to actually exit a game unless you held down the player 1 button, but through the first firmware update that they did provide, they have now switched it that you can exit the game simply by pressing the live button and then confirming with player 1 you're back to your main menu. All 14 games on the cabinet do play exceptionally well, with no known issues that I have seen throughout my month of owning the cab. There is, however, a reported frame skip issue in the original Pac-Man, as Pac-Man is down along the lower part of the screen eating pellets. You can notice he almost disappears for a second. Honestly, I really had to look hard to notice it. Maybe I'm not OCD enough, but I do understand that it will bother some people, and hopefully this is something that is corrected in a future firmware update. So anyways guys, that's my look at the Arcade1Up Pac-Man XL cabinet, and after many revisions of Pac-Man from Arcade1Up, this is the best one to date. I've said this before when talking about the XL cabinets. This is what Arcade1Up should have always been making, and this is the Pac-Man that Arcade1Up should have made right from the very start. Honestly, it was hard to find any faults with this cabinet, you know, considering it's a toy recreation and not a real arcade cabinet, but there were a few small details that I did want to point out, one of which is the control panel was a little narrow, and I did find my palms resting over the edge instead of on the control panel. It would have been nice if the control panel was a little wider in order for me to comfortably sit my hands on it. The other thing is the cabinet itself is a little bit too short. It needed to be a little bit longer so it could have fit a longer control panel, and also the art on the side where it has to be to the correct aspect ratio would have been nice if the cabinet itself was a little bit wider so the art could fit more on the cabinet than just on the top portion. Other than that, I don't really like the light up buttons, so it would have been nice if there was an option to turn those off, or better yet, just use better buttons. Outside of that, I'm absolutely in love with this cabinet. It's got a great games list, the form factor's fantastic, and it looks so nice in a row with my other big Arcade1Up cabinets, so I am very happy with it. Anyways guys, let me know in the comments, what do you think of the Arcade1Up Pac-Man XL cabinet? Is this something you've picked up already? And if so, what do you think of it? Or if you're considering picking it up, let me know. Anyways guys, thank you very much for watching. This is MichaelBtheGameGenie, and I'll talk to you next time.